We're speaking with the Honourable Premier, Mr. Donaldson Romeo, and the Honourable Deputy Premier, Mrs. Delmaude Ryan. Coming out of the talks that we've had with the delegation from the DfID, the UK Department for International Development, I think the key question would be because, and I'll start with you, Premier, because there's been so much attention, as is normal, but perhaps even more so now than before, drawn to this round of DfID negotiations. How has it gone?
It has turned out, the whole negotiation this week has turned out far better than I expected. I think we have a better understanding as to how we're going to work as partners. We understand better what the job is that needs to be done. We know, and I think they understand quite clearly, that our government is very concerned about our people, concerned about our poor, concerned about the elderly, concerned about the mentally challenged, concerned about our civil servants, concerned about our private sector, concerned about the police, the nurses, the circumstances under which everybody work. We each work and live. And I think they understand that we're going to challenge the system. We're not going to accept the status quo. We're not just going to sit and accept a fixed budget. What we have managed to do is that we've sat down together to look at what is realistic. We presented what we considered a realistic budget. And we've insisted that we're going to stick to that tune. We have been told that there's a fixed sum of money. And that's the other thing that has come clearly out of this meeting, is that we realize that the big job for our politicians is to influence the politicians in Britain to bring the change that we need. That's the key thing that has come out of these meetings. We can't be arguing with civil servants who are doing a good job of presenting what they're told to present and expect to have a different outcome. We have to get ourselves engaged in communicating with our partners, putting our arguments to our colleagues, our counterparts, the politicians in London who make the final decision as to how much money we get, as to what the priorities are. And let me give you an example. Let me see. What I've learned is that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, former Premier, did not lose the battle over the port because he didn't present a good argument. He lost the battle because he didn't win the argument at the highest level. Somebody at the highest level decided no port, no spending of $100 million US for 5,000 people. That's basically it. In the end, somebody makes that decision. Although it might seem viable to put a port in, somebody may still just decide it's going to be unpopular to give $100 million US to 5,000 people.
So then, on the back of that, what would the strategy be going forward? Is it now to go to the UK, interact with the decision makers, the politicians, the ministers responsible, and get them to see the Montserrat reality as we/you are living it?
We need to get the politicians in Britain at the highest level to understand first that as partners, we need to acknowledge that we're not just partners, but that we are British. One thing is very clear, that both parties, politicians on this end, politicians on that end, need to acknowledge that the British government has a greater responsibility to Montserrat than it has to Africa or Haiti. We are not just partners, but we are British. And I think that's where we've lost the support we needed over the past 20 years. That battle was lost. In 1997, when Mr. Brandt was in power, the journalists came and challenged Her Majesty's government to treat the people of Montserrat as British people who need help. And the British government responded. In the 17 years that have passed since then, we've gone back to the situation where we're being treated as if we're begging for aid, as people in Africa might be begging for aid. And that must change. Then the other thing is that I think it's about time we look back and see the mistakes we've made, realize that we've wasted the years, acknowledge that, for instance, had we put a port in place 10, 12 years ago, we'd be having a totally different conversation now, which means that in acknowledging that, we need to do something as soon as possible. We can't be ifing and butting about who's responsible and whether the private sector should come in or not. This is a responsibility the British government must take dead on. Just as in this week's discussions, we're talking about the fact that salary increases have not gone up. We haven't had salary increases in 8 years for the public service nor the private sector. We haven't had increases for social welfare in 9 years, except for a little change a few months ago. We have so much unemployment and underemployment. We have single mothers who are struggling to feed their children. Civil servants can't feed themselves properly. We have to acknowledge the truth that this is the situation and that we have a responsibility together to address it. And as my deputy leader will tell you, we've come to the understanding that as partners, we must very soon act swiftly to make sure we get projects on stream that will provide employment for our people. We know we need roads to be maintained and fixed. We know we need buildings to be maintained. We all acknowledge this. But we must not only increase the budget where it needs to be increased, but make sure that on the capital side that we have projects coming on stream in sequence so that people have work continuously. We must choose the right projects. We must make sure we have a port. We must make sure we put in a fiber optic to assist with our interconnectivity. We know exactly what needs to be done. We've been talking about them for years and years. The time has come for both parties, the British government and the local government, to simply say, hey, yes, together in a given time, with the commitment of funds that are available, we're going to do these various things with the intention of getting Montserrat back on its feet to where we have an economy that's viable and where our people can come back. The other thing that was acknowledged this week was that, and as our deputy leader rightly said in the meetings, that we have a few thousand people on Montserrat, and we keep talking about them. 2,000-3,000 indigenous Montserratians plus another 2,000 from the region. But we have 6,000 in London, and that's those who evacuated. 2,000 in New York, in the USA who evacuated. Over 1,000 in Antigua. We have Montserratians in large numbers outside of Montserrat. Not only can we tap into the resources we have, not only we can work from there and here together over the internet, by video conference, not only can strengthen where we are weak, we are challenged, we are continually challenged by DfID that we lack capacity. We can fill that gap with the help of our people.
So we're talking about attracting the people in the Montserrat diaspora back to Montserrat to be part of the rebuilding of our society.
Those who have skills, we need teachers. We need people who have expertise in public-private partnership, ventures. And just the other day, I found a Montserratian with such potential. Visiting Montserrat, and hardly anybody knows. We have persons with expertise in tourism who are anxious to assist us. Some in New York, some in London, some in the region, right next to us in Anguilla. So we're going to have to pull these people together. We need funding to assist us to set up these teams and to get us to function together. We have to be creative in finding ways to bring the change we need, to attract the investment we need.
Premier, you just mentioned the Deputy Premier who is here with us, Mrs. Delmaude Ryan. Premier spoke about the importance of getting the economy stimulated. He mentioned public-private partnership. Coming out of the talks that we've had this week, what encourages you that we are now seeing the possibilities for the way ahead, using that option, that strategy, and how different would that be from what might have been done in the past?
Well, the commitment from the DfID team that was here is in relation to how we will go forward in looking at both the recurrent and capital projects in the one discussion. The focus this week was primarily on the recurrent budget, and the recurrent budget is in relation to the day-to-day operations of government. But what could have been done differently is looking in tandem with that recurrent budget, what capital projects that will be coming on stream, how we can have more of a parallel implementation of those projects, especially where they have impact on the recurrent budget, and especially where there are opportunities for bringing on board private sector developers. For example, looking at the road projects are discussed by itself, but where we could have looked at smaller portions or of that project being front-loaded, that will create an incentive for, say, a person or developers. Those type of discussions, tying that with what happens on the recurrent, would have given you a better picture of how we can balance out both the recurrent budget and the capital budget projects, and the capital budget as well, in terms of how we are able to generate revenues for Montserrat. On the recurrent, the revenue coming in is not as high, and how can we increase that? And we're looking at it in isolation of what kind of projects we could have put in place to help to increase revenue coming in on the recurrent side. And then so that it shows you a full picture as to how we can support our recurrent budget over that three-year period as we plan. So going forward, the promise is that we will take that, although one of the things that was promised as well is that we will now continue to have more monthly discussions on where things are on the ground, so that we are not waiting 12 months after to review what would have gone wrong or where things are, that we are more proactive in addressing some of the issues that does have an impact on the recurrent budget, and that we could be more creative in how we utilize resources that are there in influencing what happens on the recurrent budget. And one of the things I've also discussed is in relation to, it's now at the time when we should be thinking, what exactly do we want for Montserrat? And that's a question that is both for the government of Montserrat and DfID. What exactly do we want to achieve from the budgets that we are discussing each time? And we started off the week under the parameters that there is a fixed budget with very little room for accommodating anything new. But coming at the end of the week, understanding that that envelope can be open a bit more, and that there is the opportunity that our message can be related to the minister going up. So with that discussion, there is hope in terms of what we can do to better use the resources, better use our time in these discussions to focus on the development of Montserrat. What was also clear in our message is that we want to take back Montserrat, and take it back in the sense that we want to see work happening on the ground. We want to see things happening. And because the thinking of looking at the recurrent budget in isolation, it appears that everything is happening on the public sector side, nothing is happening on the private sector side. And obviously, in the context that we are in right now, unless we have substantial funds coming in to support the capital projects, and unless we move very quickly in having those capital projects front-loaded, you're going to have an increased recurrent budget. And that increased recurrent budget is already being shown, where we have to be addressing social services and the type of requests that are now coming in from social services. And that is very important for both us, Government of Montserrat, and DfID to note. But we are interested in having Montserrat back for Montserrat, and in relation to moving us back to the pre-volcano situation where we're pretty much thinking on our own.
Taking all of that into consideration, are we looking more towards a sort of what they call in the UK PPI, public-private initiative, public-private partnership, in terms of an economic strategy for Montserrat, and having DfID buy into that as well?
But that is what we're talking about when we spoke of having the discussions right now in the capital funding, because as I gave the example of a developer wanting to have, say, put in some houses or condominiums or whatever the case may be, having the discussion on the focus on the capital as well, and what type of incentive we can give on the capital side, for example, putting in the road infrastructures, then we can see what the returns are coming in, and that's where that type of partnership can come in. There's also opportunities for public-private partnership in other industries that government may have an interest in. And so it's looking at the whole picture, not just half of the picture, focusing on the recurrent without looking at what can happen on the capital side that will positively influence the recurrent.
How satisfied are you that the DfID representatives here, even though, yes, they will have to report back to their bosses, took all of that on board and now would be considering that as a developmental strategy for Montserrat?
I think there's a sense of hope, and they're actually looking at considering the time frame they have to get things in, given that it's an election year in Britain, what things can be done. And there's a sense of hope that this is something that we can work together as partners in moving forward. And as I said, there's a commitment that we will do things differently in future budgetary talks. One of the things that was also raised and challenged and reminded of was in relation to the fact that Britain was interested in the white paper, the 2012 white paper, for us to spend to save. And in our discussions, we should have been looking at things like what does this budget really gives us? Are we really spending to save in the future, or are we continuing to spend this money over and over with not getting the type of results that we're looking for? When we look back over the years, although we would have put things in place like strategic growth plan, etc., and have implemented 90%, over 90% of the targets that were on those growth plans, we have not really grown. When we have looked at so many other strategies that have been put in place, we have not really grown. And so if we're going to continue discussing the budget on one half of the budget on the recurrent side, within a fixed envelope, then you're saying that we are continuing the whole process of not being able to grow. And as a nice new term I learned this week, we are continuing to be at a low-level static equilibrium.
Who did that come from? Cue to the Premier.
You know, we have to admit, and we've come to face the fact that while we have good ideas, while even DfID on the other side, discussions are willing to listen to our new ideas and to bend to our arguments, that they are limited in what they can do. They have come with instructions to present a fixed budget to us, but of course, we have to be realistic. I mean, we must understand that they are not the audience that we have to influence to make the changes I said before.
So who would that audience be then?
Clearly, the audience would be the members of Parliament who represent the people of England, who make the big decisions there, who give instructions in the end, or make the decisions that the civil servants have to carry out. So one thing was clear from the meeting is that we have to treat the civil servants to come to meet with us with greater respect and understanding that they're carrying out a duty that they're given. And what we managed to do was to be able to send the message through them back to their superiors that we are not going to be doing things as usual, and that we have to follow very soon after this week of meetings by engaging the Honourable Swain for DfID in writing, in video conferences, by visiting him, through our people in London lobbying and challenging Her Majesty's government, and the people of Montserrat too. We don't want our teachers to sit back and be satisfied or expect a miracle. They have to play a part. They have to come forward with the suggestions and with the energy that will force government in the right direction. Parents and teachers. All of us are affected by healthcare that is not up to the right standard. So we have to force the issue. And I enjoy, as a politician, having my people challenge me. That's where I get my power. When I know they challenge me, when they get in groups to challenge me about concerns that I want to fight for, they empower us. We have to take, as our Honourable Willock will always say, the energy forward. We have to be energized enough. And of course, be smart enough and understand British politics enough to win the battle that has been lost, especially over the past 5 years.
At this juncture, we have a sort of a triangular situation. We have the 20th anniversary since the eruption started. We also have the elections coming up in May in the United Kingdom. That is significant for us and our negotiations. And also, we have for the first time, well, in your case, this new government, having your first negotiations with the DfID team on a recurrent budget, but also looking forward to something developing along the capital line. How do you view those three elements coming together? Opportunities, challenges?
Well, it's more and more urgent that we take the right approach right now and not wait till the end of our term to be kicking and squirming. We are in a unique position. It may be challenging, but all the more reason for us to make sure that we listen to what Britain is saying to us. First, they're saying to us they want good governance. They want us to have practices that eradicate corruption. They want us to make sure that we have good financial management of the resources we get, the funds that they give us. They want to make sure that we have good plans in executing and implementing what we're supposed to do. So we have to get it right on Montserrat. That enables us as members of parliament to look straight in the face of the member of parliament in London and say, we insist that we are treated as British. We insist that the funds that are available are provided. We insist that we work as partners to fix the problems and to execute the projects, to fund the projects that we know will get Montserrat back on its feet. But you talk about elections. We also know that with the elections coming, we could have a different government. We could have a different representative for DfID. And we could have different representatives in the offices in DfID as well, in the civil service, as has happened over the past 20 years, which means our strategy must be able to meet that challenge. And to me, we have to start now, as I said before, in working with our Montserratians in London to lobby Her Majesty's government. That's unusual. Not really so unusual, actually, because the BVI do it, the Turks and Caicos and the other islands do it. We have to use our people where they are to challenge the same members of parliament who are going up for elections now, and those who win, to do what is right by Montserrat. This has not been done yet. So before elections, we have to do our lobbying starting now to let the politicians know that Montserratians vote in London. Montserratians represent 3 times the number of Montserratians in Montserrat, and they want to come home. Many of them, the elderly, the young, the middle-aged, all want to come home, and they need to see a Montserrat back on its feet again, that is strong, that is worth coming back home to, with good healthcare, with good schools, with jobs, right? And for those who need welfare, a reasonable welfare system. Otherwise, they can never come back. So we have to unite, to use the political influence we have in Britain to get what we need. So that's my answer to before election, what we do before elections, or what we do after. So I believe we should turn what seems to be a problem into an asset.
Deputy Premier?
Yes, I must say that it was a very interesting week, and what I've said to the DfID team that was here, it ended a bit sobering because I felt that we were pretty much on a recurrent decimal where we're expecting to have change using the same strategies and the same tactics. And that the time has come now, after 20 years of dealing with this volcanic situation, that we review the way that we approach budgetary aid to Montserrat. There is an opportunity for us as Montserratians and for the British government to shine, an opportunity where they, having an overseas territory, can use us as a model to the rest of the other international agents and governments like USA and China and others who may have small island territories, that they have an opportunity to turn an island that has lost everything into an island that has hope and have promise. So it is something that they should see too, that's in their interest, to want to take Montserrat and make it into something really special.
I want to say one thing. When I use the word partners, I say it with confidence. I am confident that the people of Montserrat and the people of Britain, that the government of Montserrat and the government and Her Majesty's government can and will work together as partners. I believe the time has come, and it is now, for this to happen. We have to first believe it, and we have to take the initiative to insist that this happens. And that is why when you hear me talk about fighting the bigger battle, I am very committed to the bigger battle. We must win the bigger battle. For Montserrat to get back on its own 2 feet again, these PDM candidates who were voted for, we who said we're going to put people first, we who said we're going to get jobs, we who said that we believe if we negotiate better, we'll influence Her Majesty's government to provide a seaport soon. We, with the confidence in ourselves and in our people, with God on our side, we will bring the change. We can and we will bring the change that was promised by simply doing what every politician before us had the opportunity to do. They did their part. In some way or another, Her Majesty's government and the government of Montserrat have kept Montserrat alive, and we are thankful to all who have gone before us. But the time has come for us to just simply say, it ends here. This will not continue. We will not keep going down lower. Our banks have to get the confidence to invest in our country. The British government has to reach the point where they're going to decide, look, for the good of all, we're going to invest in infrastructure as we know we would invest in our own in Britain. The time has come, and I'm being repetitive, for us as partners to make a bad story into a good story. And as I would say, to turn ash into cash, because we have the resources, we have the capacity, we have the funding, we have everything together to make it happen. We have the opportunity. 20 years have gone for us to learn from. So it's time for us to just do what we know needs to be done.
At this juncture, Premier and Deputy Premier, we've also been joined by the Honourable Minister responsible for Agriculture, Trade, Housing, Lands and the Environment, Mr. Claude Hogan, who is by training and profession a trade economist as well as being a politician. From the perspective of the negotiations we've had, Mr. Hogan, what is your take on the strategy employed, and how do you see this manifesting itself for Montserrat in terms of realizing the types of funding and the types of projects we need to have in place to kickstart the economy?
We still don't have the fiber optic. We still don't have the ferry. We still want to explore quarry and mining, which will contribute to the economic growth. We still don't have housing. Our roads are still not yet fixed. We can't escape from Salem in any short period of time, even though we had an A1 road that was basically spruced up. And therefore, we were talking about a situation there that was kind of preset in our manifesto. As PDM, also had taken account of what was required to put this country on a firmer footing. When we got into government, of course, we didn't have to go immediately back to the public, having just come from them and having this broad idea which was shared by the public servants already. So we went straight into the negotiations quite informed about where we wanted to go. The problem we found is that approaching the unleashing of Montserrat's economic growth to create employment, private sector activity, creating this engine through the private-public partnerships, we found that the infrastructure, the human, institutional, the public service support infrastructure was not there. They were basically going on whatever money was available, and the social affairs minister would have told you, they tried to fit whatever money was available for social services, for example, just to fit who they could. There was not a comprehensive look at what is required to take the country forward, both on the public goods side and on the private sector engine side. So we went in that we had to get it at a level that we could say, let us launch from here. Fortunately, Minister Ryan had taken part in the functional reviews, which said, this is what you need for that purpose. My ministry, Agriculture, Lands, Housing and the Environment, Trade, they had already incrementally implemented that up to a point, and they had reached a point where basically, we needed a policy decision if you're going to go fully and if you're going to try to achieve these national outcomes, or are we going to just wallow in the mud? And so therefore we had to do something. When they said, okay, there might be, in the middle of the week, there might be an increase, but, we can't tell you what it is, and we're not sure, and it can't be much because our hands are tied. And we said, listen, we are not even going to talk about an increase. We're going to talk about what is the minimum program that we need to deliver something, some kind of public goods and some kind of economic growth. Where do we need to be? And you have done all the studies, reviews, and you review the reviews. You have spent $3 million in a year, US, reviewing the reviews, and we have not implemented anything, and they are all stuck. If we stay here, low-level static equilibrium, we are going to spiral downwards. So let us know now, we can't go any lower. This is an overseas territory. You can't tell your minister you leave us like some country in the backwoods. So they said, and we said in our strategy meeting, we are going to come up with what it is we are going to take forward. And we chose our priorities. We presented our priorities, then we said, now we have these priorities, what would it take to deliver? Minister Ryan was involved. Mali was well advanced because they had incrementally done their work. MCW was advanced as well because they had all of their functional reviews done. And
I'm just going to interject here for those who might not follow. Mali is your Ministry of Agriculture, Trade, Lands, Housing, Environment. MCW, Ministry of Communications and Works.
Right. So after we said that, we said we have to do something to generate revenue and revive the private sector. So we can't just accept $10 and give everybody $2. Let us do at a minimum what is required, cost it afterwards. And wherever it comes out, that's the realistic minimum, basic minimum. And that's what we did. And we went back to them. And the Premier then delivered an even more potent conclusion at the end, which I think has put us in an even better position than just another $20. But in a position of a reconsideration of whether they leave us in this low level of static equilibrium or what standard and platform we're going to be existing on as a community, a going concern in the Caribbean.
Right. So earlier on, I spoke about this triangulation of situations. I spoke about the 20th anniversary since the eruption started. Your first round of negotiations with DfID as a new government, and the fact that it's an election year in the UK. So I'm getting from you that we are at an absolutely critical juncture now for Montserrat within all of that.
Yes, critical both for the public sector and critical for institutions such as Mull, Water Authority, all our Port Authority. Basically, DfID intervention has kept us alive for the last 17 years. It's like a dole system, but that cannot work for a whole island because at some point everybody's going to want to jump off, and we are getting down to that level. They've recognized that, and we're not going to slide any further way down. So they recognize that it's just a matter of now, where do we position it? And I think the elections in the UK is a teething problem because you are not sure where the current government would want to go on that in terms of what the election platform is, because there is this discussion about 7% in foreign direct aid for people overseas. But the Premier has said, well, we are not really foreign. We are overseas territories. Whether that is a winning argument at this juncture, it's a gamble. But that is where we are with that. If there's a new government, then again, the position we have will remain current, that we are not just any other country somewhere. We're an overseas territory. We're not kith and kin, but we're family, and therefore the argument holds. I'm not sure when to make a PR attack, but somewhere along there, it's a sensitive issue whether, regardless to which government is in power, what do you do with an overseas territory that is struggling, especially when you have given nearly $1 billion to one called St. Helena somewhere else? What is wrong with the other one in the Caribbean?
Is it time for a different type of discussion, a different type of approach from Britain to its overseas territories? We know what's happening, or what has happened with the Dutch OCTs. We know what has happened with, or what the situation is with the French Department Outre-mer. Could Montserrat, or is Montserrat in that position now where we could redirect the approach that Britain takes towards its overseas territories based on what I hear you saying?
Well, it's a highly powerful international question of international significance. I have to be careful how I phrase this. I might be regarded persona non grata in Montserrat. But certainly, from a Montserrat political perspective, we do not want to give up our autonomy and control of our destiny and our running of our affairs on Montserrat because we want a little more money. We're not going to trade that in for British aid. What we want is a recognition that we are part of the economic enterprise called the United Kingdom government and its colonies. This morning I went all the way back to a little bit of history, that if you look at the legacy of the French, the Dutch, the Spanish in the Caribbean islands, the British are always in the wake. And I don't believe the British people have the conscience in this 21st century to still be sidelining colonial people.
We've been hearing quite a lot about partnership in this discussion. Premier, partnership with the UK. What about the local partnership? Could you expand on that?
Before I get to that, let me just simply say, it's obvious. Unless we work as partners with Her Majesty's government, we're going to get nowhere. 20 years has proven that. Partnership to a certain extent, not to the level that we need a partnership to deliver a Montserrat that's going to stand on its own 2 feet. It started now. And that's why it's clear that before the meetings, I'd already made the appeal to Her Majesty's government, to the DfID ministers, to the civil servants there, that we want to work as partners with them. And they accepted and responded in kind. As you would know, we're working as partners to fix MDC. As you may also know, just months after we got in, after an appeal for housing, DfID responded very soon after and agreed to address emergency housing for 5 to 7 houses. Didn't take long. Partnership there again. As Premier, I'm coming down the line now. As Premier and ministers, we worked as partners throughout this week, as we worked before, as we worked during the campaign. No one-man team, no two-man team. As I will tell you this, when you go in mud, when you drive in mud, you need 4-wheel drive, right? We didn't only have 4-wheel drive. We had the Parliamentary Secretary to back us, Honourable Willock, we had Honourable David Osman attending, and we also have the support of Dr. Buffong in the background with our Minister of Health. Wherever she needed assistance or information, she's available, she's capable. So we're not just 4-wheel drive, we have 7-wheel drive, okay? And as Premier and ministers, we also chose to involve the PSs and accounting officers in our meetings and outside of our meetings. We met separately in many ways.
Coming from yourself as Premier, how critical was that to have your civil servants, your key permanent secretaries, your technocrats, your local experts?
I don't think that needs much of an answer, but simply that together we will do far more than if we are not working together. That's common sense. We need the expertise of every individual. In our team as ministers, you will find Honourable Claude will fill the gap in one way, Honourable Minister Ryan will fill in another way, so with Honourable Lewis, and so would I. That's why we're here together speaking to you. Because when you put the message together, you're going to get a very complete package. In the same way, when you bring the counting officers and the PSs with you, you tend not to miss certain things. We must function as a whole. We represent all of the people who voted for us. And that's why you say when governments change, you now work with the government. Well, the government must work with the PS's accounting officers. So we need some improvement in that area. So that's why we work together. Common sense. And I must also say that we were very pleased to have the presence of the governor in many of our meetings. He didn't just sit quietly. At times, he made a point or two that contributed significantly to what I think the outcome will be from these meetings. So we were not working as partners only with DfID and government of Montserrat, but we were working with FCO as well, which is important. All three must work together.
And FCO being the Foreign and Commonwealth Office.
But last but not least, and most important, is engaging our people. Our people on Montserrat, our diaspora overseas, the non-nationals in Montserrat, all the friends, the expats, everyone. Our next mission as we go through the next weeks and months, we are going to be finding ways to go to our people, form groups, think tanks, tasks. We're going to set up a task force, for example, for tourism that will involve Montserratians in London with expertise, Montserratians in Anguilla, Montserratians in New York, and Canada, as a task force or as a think tank or whatever sort of a team to pull together the ideas that will attract investment to Montserrat and improve our tourism product. So we have to now engage our people. We have to be transparent. We have to be accountable. And one thing that I will end with, it is clear that good governance is going to be the key to the way going forward. As far as possible, as a people, we're going to have to try our best to commit to good governance. Because I think without good governance, there will be no sustainable development. There will be no sure future. And we will have more respect, not only from Her Majesty's government and their taxpayers, but also from the world at large. So we have a job to do, and I'm confident that it will be done. Thank you very much.